besides being a USA under 15 representative, and besides having worked for ESPNcricinfo as a multimedia editor, one of the other things that people identify you with is your family connection to Mohebullah Archiwal, who people may remember in Jarrod Kimber's story that was in the Cricket Monthly in September 2017 titled The Shahid Afridi of Kansas. And it focuses that whole story. It's an incredible story. I'm sure most people who go to Cricinfo would have read it, and not just one time. It was an incredible feature that Jarrod did, like a lot of things that Jarrod does. This story in particular talks about Archie's journey from Afghanistan. He worked as a translator for the military, and his journey trying to get into the US and the connection that he has with you and your family. Talk about that, especially now in the context of what's going on recently with the American withdrawal from Afghanistan and the chaos around that, and a lot of the attention that has been paid to kind of the visa snafu fiasco with regards to all the translators and people who had helped the American military basically being left behind. You know full well what that experience is all about, having that connection with Archie and all the struggles that he went through. So tell us about Archie and how you first came into contact with him, and what he means to you and your family.
First of all, if you haven't read Jarrod's piece about Archie, I highly encourage you to read it. It's pinned to the top of my Twitter. I don't know that it'll ever come down. On a personal note, as far as like things I did at ESPN that I'm super proud of, getting Jarrod to write a story about him is to me, the most important thing I did while I was there. It's the thing that makes me the happiest. And I didn't do much except for like, hey, Jarrod, I think I have a story that you might like. What do you think? Radio silence for 6 weeks. And he's like, yep, like that. Radio silence for 6 weeks. Here's a first draft. Anyway, so I'm really, really proud of that. Not that I did anything, but it's a story that I thought deserved to be told. And it's a story that like, I'm very happy that ESPN published, because like, yeah, it's about cricket, but it's like cricket is the language in which we could express what was going on, is the way I feel about it. So if you haven't read it, read it. It's incredible. Archie showed up in Wichita one day, and the lady that was handling his case at the IRC asked him what he liked to do. He was like, I know how to kill people, and I like to play cricket. She was like, well, I know the only cricket guy. I get a phone call from my dad, and he's like, what are you doing tonight? Nothing. He's like, why don't you come down? Let's get in the nets. I'm bringing this dude from Afghanistan. I'm picking him up now. So I meet Archie. He's very quiet. He likes to play cricket. He bowls fastish. It was a great time. We spent a couple of hours just in the nets until the sun went down. A couple of weeks later, my parents were like, why don't you just stop paying rent at your apartment and move in? They bought him a suit. My mom got him a job at Walgreens, and they really did adopt him. He became a citizen in 2020 in time to vote, which was very cool. And he currently lives in Sacramento, California. But like you said, he is a translator, was a translator for a couple of different branches of the U.S. Armed Forces, as well as like the Italians and maybe the Georgians. He has lost people in his life to the Taliban. And when I say that, I mean like the Taliban have murdered people close to Archie because of his work that he did for the United States. And so at the present moment, he's mortified about what could happen to his family, specifically his brothers, due to the fact that like he grew up with some people that would become part of the Taliban establishment. They know who he is. They know who his family is. And so he's incredibly worried that something's going to happen to them. And he's lost enough people to the Taliban because of his work for the United States. Like it's not like out of the realm of possibility that something bad could happen again. I've been talking to him a lot. We put together a letter to all of the senators and the two senators from California, as well as all of the House reps and state and local officials, about like trying to get a visa process fast tracked for at least his brother to be able to be like sponsored as an immigrant to the United States. Now that Archie's a citizen, he can sponsor people, direct family members, right, to immigrate. The process that usually takes like up to a year and a half was done in 6 weeks. I think maybe Senator Feinstein had something to do with that, which is great. But the next part is going to be a while as well, because now it's on to like the interview process, and like I'm not sure that anybody's around in Kabul to interview Archie's brother to get him over here, let alone like all of the other obstacles that stand in his way. There was some talk about trying to get him to Turkey legally, but I mean, it's heartbreaking. It feels like 20 years for what? And then to have such a personal connection, somebody like I think of his family, to be in a position of danger that I hopefully will never understand. And man, it's just like, it just really sucks. Like he's taken bullet wounds for the United States, been blown up by a couple IEDs, and yeah, he made it out, and his life is pretty good right now. But the fact that like what he had to do, or rather what he did to have that life, is almost certainly going to put people he loves in danger. It sucks. And it's fixable, which is the more frustrating part. But it's just such a monumental task to get it done that I'm only like adjacent to the situation, but it must be really, really difficult for him.
I mean, that whole process you just talked about, the layers and the red tape that's involved getting an interview. Like you said, the U.S. Embassy has been abandoned. There's nobody there anymore. So realistically, does he feel like he has any hope of getting his family to the U.S.?
I mean, like he has to, right? He does. He's looking for ways. I think the answer is yeah, he's got some hope. Whether or not anything happens, like it remains to be seen. And like it's such a fluid and serious situation that like who does know anything about that situation right now? Like honestly, like I mean, I listen to Pod Save the World, and I read the news, and you know, especially about like in the cricket context of Afghanistan, but like it's not good, and nobody knows much else. I mean, he has to be optimistic, because like if he just resigns himself to the fate that like the fact that like the Taliban will kill his family, like that's an impossible headspace to live in. You know what I mean? So he's got to be optimistic. He is also acutely aware of the reality, which is it's incredibly difficult to make that happen, especially now.
From your conversations with him, has he even contemplated going back to try and bring people with him directly, or is it just too dangerous?
One day, I saw a photo of Archie on Facebook hugging Rashid Khan. And I was like, bro, how did you meet Rashid Khan? There's really only one way that you would have been in the same room with him. He's like, yeah, I went back. I didn't tell anyone. I told mom 2 weeks after I got back, and she flipped out. And I was like, yeah, I can imagine. So he has gone back. I think right now I haven't asked him. He hasn't said anything, but I'm sure that that's just like the death sentence, I assume.
What is he doing now in California?
He's working for the state. He had to get out of, he was working for the IRC, the International Refugee Committee, to like go through the process of once a refugee lands in the United States, getting them a job and getting them housing and making them self-sufficient. He was doing that for the IRC as well as doing it directly for the state of California. But the Afghan community in Sacramento really started to get to back channel messages from his family. As if you read the piece, and I don't want to spoil it, there's quite a big drama there, and the last thing he wants is getting like back channel messages from people he used to know in Afghanistan. So he had to completely step out of that. To my knowledge, like the very small extent of what I know that he does, I think he works for the state of California, helping people that have been like recently let go from their jobs with like their options for like transitioning into another job, or like softening the blow of being fired for your job. So like your like welfare options, your training options, like what you can do after you've been let go from a job. And he's doing that. He works at the state. He got a job at the State Department, and they said, great, you just got to go to Kabul. And he was like, nope, not doing that.
Since the story, it's been 4 years now. So since then, besides the fact that he's now a U.S. citizen and the fact that he's working for the state of California, what else should people know about him and what he's doing or has done since?
I think that Archie is a shining example of what the United States can produce. Not even like, yeah, his story is incredible. The crazy amount of stuff he had to go through to get here, or to like live any semblance of like what you or I would think is a normal life. He is an exemplary human who has done and had to deal with more stuff than I can ever imagine. He is the product of the America that I know and love. And if anybody ever has any doubts about like what it looks like to be a refugee or an immigrant from another country to come to America, like Archie is the poster child. I'm not signing him up for that, but you couldn't do better. than him. He's trying to buy a house right now. His life's really taken off in a way that I don't know if you would have asked like a young Archie if you could have ever. It seems like pretty mundane to you and me, maybe, but like he's living it up, man. He's loving it. He's just living the dream in Sacramento, California.
Living it, the American dream, 100%.
Living the American dream, yeah. Literally trying to, anyway.